And just some housekeeping rules will, I'll ask you to please keep yourselves on mute until we get to the Q&A point. And then once we reach that, depending on the amount of attendees, we can either do questions through the chat or just unmute yourself and we'll go through those just in a regular conversation. So I'll get started. As I said, we're gonna be recording this call. Where we've just already started recording this call. And if anyone misses the intro, they can just go and rewatch it. So welcome, thank you so much for joining to our Global Mobility webinar today. This is a very broad topic, so we put the few or the key subjects that we consider important of discussion within global mobility in Canada. Special focus in the temporary foreign worker program. So what are LMIAs, employer sponsorship, the international mobility program. We'll discuss a few of the main labor market impact assessment exemptions that we see and how employers go about submitting an application for an offer of employment. And then we'll also be talking about the different types of work permits and also the application that foreign nationals or your employees can do after receiving either an LMIA or being eligible for an exemption. And if you feel it is easier to ask your questions as you go through the chat, please feel free to do so. I'll be happy to address them at the end. Quick round of introduction, just so you know who we are. Who is Encubate? I'm myself, Maria Garces-Cubels, RCIC, so regulated Canadian immigration consultant. I've been working with Encubate for almost 4 years now. I've originally started working in our consultations team, focusing on the economic pathways for immigration for international students, workers, and investors in Canada. And as I grew up, my passion for building those pathways and preparing solutions to our clients, I moved to our legal team to actually work and lead the team on these applications. And I have been specialized in economic-based immigration programs, anything from express entry to provincial programs, as well as work permits and employer sponsorship. So for the past, I would say 2 years, we've been focusing more on employer sponsorship and global mobility on its own, and this is what we're going to be discussing today. I also speak Spanish, and our team actually we offer services in, I believe, 5 languages. So if you ever feel the need of discussing any topics or any of your employees need to discuss anything in another language, we're more than happy to assist you with that. Also, quick introduction of our principal consultant, Mr. Basil Sauter, also on our CIC. He's the founder of Encubate and has been working within the Canadian and US immigration field for over 10 years now. So he specialized also in economic-based immigration, business immigration, and family sponsorship as well. And the last intro of our team, this is pretty much our team of Encubate. We're all spread across our different offices that I'll show in a second now. And the reason I pretty much like to show this slide is to explain that most of us in a way came originally in Canada as either workers, students, and made our way to obtaining permanent residency or citizenship. So it just comes to show that there are many pathways, there are many avenues. And also as an employers, we're here to answer questions that you may have when hiring foreign talent in Canada, which I know can be very tricky. Our offices, we have 4 main offices, or 4 offices in Canada, our main one being in Toronto, all located in the downtown areas of these cities. We're also in Vancouver, where I am currently located, Calgary, our newest office, and Montreal as well. But we obviously can service clients and employers from all over the world and all locations in Canada. We have 3 licenses that we count with and that we can represent clients under. And it is worth noting that we are also licensed and authorized to process and represent clients in the province of Quebec. If you're not aware of it, applying through certain streams, certain applications with the province of Quebec requires authorization from the ministry first. So we are authorized to do so, anything from CAQs to CSQs and permanent residency applications. So we pretty much can assist you in all Canada immigration-related visa application and sponsorship matters. And that's it for the intro. Not want to keep too much time on that. Let's dive into the actual contents of the presentation, which is hiring foreign talent, hiring foreign nationals in Canada. I'm going to go through the next slide through an overview of what we're going to be discussing. I did keep the slides pretty simple and straightforward, and wanted to focus more on the discussion and, of course, the Q&A that we'll have towards the end to answer any of those questions that you may have. So although this may be or may look overwhelming, we have put together here the main groups that we see for types of work permits in Canada into the main categories that we could identify. We're going to be touching on labor market impact assessments, on what are the employer requirements to do so. Just so you know, you'll hear me a lot referring to it as LMIA. It's just the shortening of it because it's quite a long term. So we're going to be discussing that in depth. We're going to be also talking about international agreements and how certain employees, certain candidates from certain countries or citizenship can qualify for the free trade agreements that Canada has. Canadian interest, so we'll see here C16, one of my favorite codes, and there are other positions that qualify. These are position specific or employee skill set specific, and other codes such as intracompany transfers, the IEC category, and then we'll discuss what are the types of work permits. Now, this is, again, just a very broad overview. There are many, many more codes that foreign nationals can apply under. And the reason we're also delivering this webinar and providing you with this information today is to breaking down into the basics, understand the basics of hiring foreign talent, what you need to know as an employer, and to get familiarized with the process and what are your obligations as an employer. Now, let's start talking about the basics, which are the types of work permits. As an employer, it's important to understand the difference between the types of work permits in Canada. We break it down into two main groups, open work permits and closed work permits. Open work permits are open in nature, meaning that there are no requirements, there are no specifications on what employer, what location, or what occupation any of these candidates can apply under. So as an employer, keep in mind that you can hire foreign talent, you can hire foreign nationals that hold open work permits, obviously up until the validity of that work permit. And for those who are just joining now, just a quick note that we are recording this session, so we'll be sharing the recording afterwards, and you'll have access to any part that you missed. And also a quick reminder that we're not going to take 2 hours of your time today. I'll stick to maximum 1 hour because I know time is money. So types of work permits, open, as I said, open in nature, nothing, no restrictions in that sense. And then we move into closed work permits, which is what we're going to dive in today and look at, which are job offer-based work permits. Closed work permits can be closed or can be restricted due to an employer, so being an employer-specific work permit, or being position-specific for certain streams, certain programs that we will not discuss today. We'll focus on those who are employer-specific work permits. Again, are issued based on having a job offer that you as an employer have to extend to the foreign national. Now, depending on many factors, could be based on the foreign national's country of nationality, it could be based on the foreign national's language abilities, it could be based on their certain experience or whether they have worked for a branch of your company abroad. They may need an LMIA, so employer sponsorship, in order to apply for that work permit, or they may be exempted from doing so and can directly apply for a work permit. So these two requirements, one of those needs to be met in order for the foreign national to apply for the closed work permit. We're going to be touching these two in depth. So the first one is the temporary foreign worker program. Again, very long term, so I just shorten it. But if you have any questions on any of the terms that are listed in the presentation, just let me know. So under the temporary foreign worker program, we require as an employer an approval from ESEC, Service Canada, to hire that foreign national. This is the famous LMIA, Labor Market Impact Assessment, and there are a series of requirements, series of steps that we need to follow in order to get that approval. Once we receive that approval, we can share that with the temporary foreign worker that we have in mind, or the foreign candidate that's applying for the position, and they can go ahead and apply for the work permit. So one first thing to understand here, and that there's a lot of confusion, in both employers and employees, is that this is a two-step process with two different government agencies. First one, we're looking at ESEC, which is the employment branch of the government, has nothing to do with immigration. And what they will do is determine whether hiring a foreign national will actually have a positive or a negative impact on the Canadian labor market. And that's why once an application is processed, we either get issued a positive LMIA or a negative LMIA. Positive, we can go ahead, send that to the foreign worker and can apply for the work permit. Negative, they'll give us the reasons for refusal, and we can try again if there is room for improvement, of course. And we'll be touching on one of my favorite streams under this temporary foreign worker program, the global talent stream, which has become quite popular in the past few years. So, as I said, there's also the other group or the other category for certain foreign nationals or certain companies that may be exempted from needed that permission, that approval from ESEC, that LMIA. And this falls under the International Mobility Program, IMB. In this case, we just need to make sure that we confirm the exemption code. So we confirm that what makes that employee eligible for not needing that LMIA, and we can go and directly apply for the work permit. The process looks a little different, and it is just shortened because there is no step, or there is not that first step with ESEC that we have to do. And we'll be giving examples of three of these IMB, these International Mobility Program codes that are quite interesting. Now, going back to the LMIA process, so the temporary foreign worker program, when it comes to employer requirements, if you are looking to sponsor a foreign national in Canada and we don't fall under any of the exemptions, then we go ahead and start the process for an LMIA application to support that foreign national. When it comes to employer requirements, there's no minimum size or revenue that we need to meet, but rather we need to demonstrate that we will be eligible to, or we will be sufficiently financially capable to offer and cover that annual wage that we're offering to the foreign worker. For that, we are required to submit certain set of documents to prove business legitimacy. Number one, set of documents to prove that we are, as an employer, as a company, providing a good or service. And number two, ability to fulfill the job offer terms, what I was just mentioning, be financially capable of doing so. ESEC provides us with a list of potential documents that they accept, most of them being CRA forms, but we can also count with attestation from a CPA, again, attesting that we are in good standing and we are financially capable of covering that the annual salary that we're offering for the temporary foreign worker. We have to meet with employer obligations and be in compliance with ESEC requirements, and that could involve also being able or being prepared for any inspections that ESEC may perform, and to keep all records for the LMIA process and any of the steps that we're taking with a temporary foreign worker after hiring up to 6 years. So even if that person is no longer working with us after 6 years, we need to make sure that we keep all those records. We will also be required to provide a transition plan for certain streams. This is something that we can also assist you with. And depending on the stream, this could be something from activities that support that foreign worker to apply for permanent residency in the future, or if that's not something that we have in mind, another transition plan could be, for example, how can that person transfer any of the skills, any of the experience that they obtain in the company to future Canadian employees. Also very important to keep in mind, especially if you have any branches in provinces of BC, British Columbia, and Manitoba, you will be required to demonstrate provincial employer registration license. This is something that you directly with the provincial government, and it's pretty much an authorization that they give you to hire foreign workers in Canada. It is free of charge for British Columbia that I'm aware of. And it can take up to 2 to 3 months to get issued. So keep that in mind whenever you want to start a process. Again, once you're issued a license, it would be a matter of renewing it, and you can use it for as many temporary foreign workers as you want. The process itself, so how it works, employer sponsorship, key things to keep in mind. We obviously need to extend a job offer to a candidate. I'm going to make a pause here and mention that there's also the option of extending or applying for a labor market impact assessment that's unnamed, meaning that we may not still have any candidates in mind, but we certainly need to fulfill a position, and we can totally do that. So not providing the temporary foreign worker's name, but just demonstrating the need to ESDC that we need to fulfill that position. So the overall objective of an LMIA application of employer sponsorship is to demonstrate to the government that we have tried to recruit talent from the Canadian labor market, but we have not been able to find anyone who either applied for the position or who has the necessary skill set for that position. And for that, that's why we need to conduct what we call a recruitment period, where we need to advertise the position that we're hiring for 4 consecutive weeks in 3 different platforms. One of them needs to be Job Bank. That's mandatory. We need to use the service of Job Match as well. And we need to target specific market groups as per ESDC requirements. Something that's also very important is that in order to determine if we're even eligible to go ahead and do an LMIA, is to confirm the median wage. And for that, we'll need to, and I can share more links after the call to assist you with this exercise, but it basically consists on checking ESDC's website, make sure that the median wage that we're offering for this temporary foreign worker or this position is in line with the median wage for that position in that location, which can vary across provinces and even across regions within provinces. Now, once we have conducted the advertising period, so 4 consecutive weeks, we go ahead and review applications and perform interviews only to qualified candidates. Qualified candidates mean that we are only required to interview Canadian citizens and permanent residents who applied for the position, even if the highest qualified person applied for the job. If he or she is not permanent resident or a Canadian citizen, we do not need to go ahead and interview that person. So that once we have prepared our findings and obviously prepared the application form and supporting documents, we go ahead and submit the application through the LMIA online portal to ESDC. This is fairly new. The portal was introduced a few years ago, but it just became mandatory as of April 1st for all applications to be submitted through the portal. It has actually improved a lot the processing times of LMIAs. And for the past ones that we've submitted, we're seeing a processing time response of 2 to 4 weeks, which is quite high. Last thing on the LMI process that's also important noting is that there are different streams. There are different application types. We have the high wage, low wage stream, depending on how the median wage for the job offer compares to the total median wage for the province. We have the global talent stream, which I'll explain in the next slide. We have the permanent residency support stream and a few more depending on the job offered, the position that's being offered, and so on. Perfect. So that's for the LMIA. I see there's a question on the global talent stream. So let's look into this. I'll answer that question also on that slide because it has to do with this. So GTS, Global Talent Stream, it is still LMIA required, meaning it's not an LMIA exempted, but it's a simplified LMIA application process. So there's a set of companies listed on ESDC's website with a set of position as well. So we can either qualify ourselves as employers through the list or through the type of job offer that we are offering or that we're applying for. Now, if we meet one of these categories and we're eligible to go through the Global Talent Stream, we are exempted from recruitment efforts, meaning that we do not have to go through the process that I just explained in the previous slide. We don't have to hire and post the job for weeks. We can go ahead and apply directly for the LMIA. So it's still an LMIA application. We'll still need to pay the government fees, but we are exempted from demonstrating those recruitment efforts. This has to do mainly for that list of position being in high demand in the Canadian labor market, most of them being tech IT positions. Again, we can share more details for your information after the call or after the webinar. And something that's very cool about this stream is that it is really giving priority processing, both at an LMIA stage and at a work permit stage for the foreign worker later on. Processing times anything as quick as 1 to 3 weeks I've seen for this stream, and the work permit qualifies for 2-week processing, although due to the strikes at the moment, we may see some delays. But generally speaking, it does qualify for that fast processing. Now, the Global Talent Stream, it does and has not to do with the Global Skills Strategy category. The Global Skills Strategy category falls also under the work permit part, and that's what makes applications qualify for fast processing. So the Global Skills Strategy category enables workers, so this does not have to do so much on the employer side, but on the work permit application side. So work allows workers to apply for fast processing. They promise 2 weeks. I've seen certain embassies that tend to process for a little longer, but generally speaking, fast processing time. And this is based on whether the application is going through the Global Talent Stream, or if it's an LMIA exempt application, it must meet certain conditions, such as being in a qualified occupation and being in a list of certain LMIA exemptions. I know this can be a bit hard to wrap around just because they're similar terms and they relate to one another, but I'll be happy, Mark, to explain more over these two differences over email or another call if needed. Okay. Perfect. And now we move to the International Mobility Program, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, it does not require employers to go through the LMIA application. We don't require that approval from ESDC. So the foreign worker, the candidate, can go ahead and directly apply for the work permit. There's only one step that the employer needs to take before submitting an application through LMIA exemptions. And that is to submit a job offer through IRCC's employer portal. If you don't have a portal yet, you will have to create one. And in there, you can submit as many job offers of employment as you want. Give a brief description of the company, of the position, and how it's needed for the operating of your business. But it's not as an extensive application as the LMIA process. Now, for most of the job offers that we have under this International Mobility Program, the category that they fall under needs to be what we call a qualified position. Again, does not apply to all, but the majority of it, we need to show a job offer in a position classified in tiers 0, 1, 2, or 3. I'll discuss what this means in the next slide in a second, but basically a position that requires certain level of education and certain level of experience, so something that's qualified. So after we submit the job offer through the employer portal, 2 to 4 business days until we receive our approval, and we receive what we call an A number. That number, we need to forward it to the foreign worker, and he or she will be able to go ahead and apply for the work permit based on an LMIA exemption, and we'll mention that A number. although it will be an LMIA exempted work permit application, it is still a closed work permit. It is still an employer-specific work permit, meaning that that person, whenever we receive the work permit, it will mention the employer's name and the position that they're being hired under. As employers, you need to understand that that candidate's status in the country depends on the employment of your company, meaning that the moment that for any reason the job or the employment gets terminated, that person has certain days to wrap up and leave the country or find another employer. So that's the main difference between open and closed work permit. Closed, it is employer restricted, and your status as a worker in Canada is restricted to that employer. Some example of these that I really, really like and that we have experience with is intracompany transfers. So this LMIA exemption code is applicable for companies in Canada who have also branches outside Canada and who want to transfer certain employees to their Canadian branch, Canadian offices. Only certain positions are eligible for this. So it needs to be positions where it requires specialized knowledge. So someone who has a certain degree of expertise and skill set to perform that position, and for senior executive positions. So for these two, any of the workers or any of the employees being transferred from the foreign branch need to have been in the company for at least 1 year, which again helps in arguing why the person's skill set, why this person's expertise is needed in the Canadian branch. Again, this is LMIA exempt, so it would be a matter of submitting the online offer of employment and applying for the work permit, and they can get work permits issued for up to 3 years. Also, one of my favorite free trade agreements, FTAs. So based on the bilateral agreements that Canada has with foreign countries, certain foreign nationals may be eligible to apply for work permits without the need of the LMIA. The list includes anything from CUSMA, so Mexico, US, Canada, free trade agreement, Chile, Korea, Peru, Panama, the list goes on and on. And the interesting thing about each of these agreements is that the list of positions vary. So we have to first determine if, for example, we have a candidate applying from Mexico for a position that we're offering in our company here. We need to make sure that the position being offered is covered under the agreement. So each of these agreements will have a list of positions that are covered. I'll give you an example for CUSMA. One of the most positions that we covered is management consultants. But for example, I'll put the example of a marketing manager. It's not covered under the agreement. So that person would not be able to go under the CUSMA. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Make sure that the list of each of these agreements, the list of positions, is covering what we're offering as a company. And another very interesting code, I have a slide for it coming up. It's LMIA exemption code C16, which falls under the International Mobility Program, Francophone Mobility. As you may be aware of, the government really wants to attract and retain foreign talent and immigration that speaks French or that are bilingual outside of the province of Quebec. And this code is a great example for that. So if we were to have a foreign national or candidate who speaks an upper intermediate level of French, no, actually, I'll move on to the slide to explain to you. We'll go back to there. So C16, if we have an upper intermediate level of French, B2, a job offer in a qualified occupation, again, classified as 0, 1, 2, or 3, whose job offer is outside of Quebec, very important that it needs to be outside of Quebec, we can apply for the C16 application. And the slide that I did skip, it's actually important in case you're not familiarized with the NOC system. Just a quick overview of how the government classifies job positions in Canada. 5 main levels. Oops, something, there we go. 6 levels. It was just restructured November last year. And we classify them as tiers. So tiers 0 to 5 And again, they are ranked based on the level of education that each of these required and the years of experience that each of these required. As an employer, if you're working on sponsoring or going through any of these processes for any of your foreign workers or candidates, you need to be familiarized with this. If you're counting with the help of with a third party or consultants like ourselves, we will walk you through this. So do not need to worry on that. But it's important to know that there is classification will determine the eligibility for certain streams within the LMIA application, so the sponsorship, and also certain streams within the International Mobility Program, and make sure that the job offer, or the better said, the candidate that we have in mind meets with the requirements of each of these levels. Now, great timing, Mark, thank you. We have a question, and again, I'll address it here because it's within the topic of the slide. When it comes to French mobility, C16, again, the job offer needs to be outside of Quebec. All French nationals, assuming that, better said, French speakers would be eligible for this code. However, they need to demonstrate to the officer that they can indeed speak and they can understand the language. And for that, they need to take a test. IRCC accepts two types of tests, the TEF Canada and the TCF Canada. And they will need to take it and achieve an upper intermediate, a B2 level, to prove to the officer that they are indeed capable of understanding and speaking the language at that level. Okay, so it does not have to do anything with your nationality, but rather with your knowledge in French and being able to demonstrate it through one of these two tests. Just before we wrap up and we move on to the Q&A, important to keep in mind when it comes to work permits applications. So up until now, we've talked about the employer side. So what you can do, or what are the options that you can offer to certain candidates, foreign nationals that you're looking to hire. So that's either with ESDC or through IRCC, through the employer portal, and later on for the work permit. When it comes to the work permit application, we're dealing with a complete different agency. We're dealing with IRCC, which is the immigration branch of the government. And that means different processing times, different forms, just a different process on its own. Work permit applications and in majority need to be submitted online. Up until COVID, pretty much, most work permit applications had to be submitted outside Canada, but COVID made things easier in this sense. In many other things, I know it didn't, but for work permit submissions, there was a public policy introduced a couple of years ago that enabled certain foreign nationals in Canada to apply for work permits from within Canada. When it comes to work permits, we see different types of processing or submission. We can apply for our work permit online. We can apply for our work permit, and online can be either from outside or inside Canada. We can apply for our work permit at a visa office or embassy abroad. And we can also apply for our work permit at a port of entry. Port of entry are pretty much borders and airports, so upon arrival to Canada. But not everyone is eligible for that. And depending on your country of nationality, you would be eligible to obtain your work permit upon arrival, or you would have to wait for a response online. Now, online processing times, especially if you have candidates who are inside Canada and who are waiting for a response, or you're about to start the process with them, please keep in mind that we're seeing 3 to 6 months of processing times. I know this is a broad range, but unfortunately, COVID left a lot of processing delays with IRCC. And add on top of that, the current strike that has been announced, that's also affecting the processing of these applications. Something that we've been seeing, and in some cases has been successful. Someone who has valid status in Canada can go to the border and request for their work permit to be issued. It would be up to the discretion of the CBSA officer to issue it on the spot. Again, I've had successful cases of clients where they've been issued without a problem, and others would just be requested to wait for their online application. So we would advise on this on a case-by-case basis, but just so you know, that's another option to expedite the issuance of that work permit. Because please keep in mind that they cannot start working until they have valid work authorization in Canada. And I think that brings me to the end of it. There's really much more that I could talk about and go more in depth to each of these exemptions, each of these processes. But again, I do not want to be taking a lot of your time today. So we'll try to summarize as much as possible, but still giving you the key points for navigating in hiring foreign talent in Canada. We offer consultations, and I am happy to jump on calls with any of you if you have any questions, if you're looking to expand your team or just understand a bit more about the process. We've worked with many employers in Canada and have support agreements with many of them, not only on the visa processing aspect, but also on the consulting part of it. It's not just about submitting applications, but also about understanding what are the potential solutions for candidates that we have in mind, or for employees that we have abroad that we are willing to bring into Canada. So we also assist in that aspect, not necessarily just the application part of it, but also supporting you on alternatives and solutions for your company and your team. So I'll give the details of how to schedule it and my contact details on the last slide. But for now, I'll go ahead and ask questions. There's 4 questions that we've received that I'll go through if we have no questions for now that I thought were quite interesting. But I know that Mark had asked a couple questions here. I believe that I addressed them both, but please let me know if I didn't. And don't be shy if you want to ask your questions with unmuting yourself, please go ahead and do so.
Are you able to provide any guidance on how the LMIA process differs in Quebec versus the process that you described today?
Absolutely, yes. And as you may be familiarized with, it's a bit different, but in its basics. So the request to ESDC is the same. We still have to demand that to ESDC, but just like many other processes for Quebec, we also need to ask for authorization to MIFI, which is the Ministry of Immigration in Quebec. So for that, as an employee, not yourself as an employer, but the employee at an employee level, they need to ask for authorization to work. And that's a CSQ application. We can also assist you with that. Sorry, CAQ application. My French is minimal, but it pretty much stands for Certificate of Approval of Quebec. And that will allow the foreign worker to work in Quebec as well. There's something very cool about Quebec that I did not mention today, and is that as an employer, you may benefit from a facilitated process that's in place. So although we still require an extra step at a work permit application level, so we require that CAQ, that approval from the ministry, you may be exempted from recruitment efforts. So just like we saw for the global talent stream, for certain positions in Quebec, employers do not need to go through the recruitment process, and they will go through what we call the facilitated process through Quebec. Again, it's a list of positions, so not all positions qualify, but and it gets updated every year. But from last time I checked, updated on January this year, it's actually quite broad. I'm happy to share that link after the call as well. The positions are in French, but you can easily translate it. And that's the key or that's the main takeaway for Quebec work permit applications. LMIAs is that as an employer, you may be exempted from the recruitment, which again, it saves us more time because we don't have to advertise for the 4 weeks. And it also removes the barrier of having to demonstrate that we have not found anyone else in the market. So it can expedite the process and just make it a little easier for you as an employer.
And does the CAQ application essentially replace the ESDC application?
No, unfortunately
Okay.
not. So we still have to go through the ESEC. And again, it's that extra step of the CAQ, which can take anything from 2 to 6 weeks. But we still require that ESDC approval saying, okay, go ahead, you can hire this foreign national. And with that, we apply for the CAQ and the work permit.
Okay, thank you.
No worries, you're welcome.
And are we going to receive a copy of the presentation after?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
So I'm happy to share a copy of the presentation with the links that I've been making reference to, as well as the recording.
Sounds good.
Perfect, thank you. Awesome. So any other questions that we have? If not, I'll just mention quickly a couple that we received in advance. One is being regarding the C16, the Francophone mobility LMIA exemption. We get asked a lot if the job offer needs to be in French, as in the day-to-day job for that person is conducted in French. And the answer is no. Again, the purpose of this specific section is to allow Francophone speakers come and work in areas outside of Quebec, which is where we tend to see most of the Francophone speakers come to. But we, in a way, need to demonstrate why is French required for the position. So, for example, if you deal with certain clients in that prefer to speak in French, or if there's any specific material that will need to be translated, or you need to deal in French, it would be beneficial to argue that. But the short answer is no, it does not mean that the work performed needs to be in French at all. Okay, and let me see, because I believe we had, oops, another question on, yes. So another big question that we get a lot from employer is on the advertisement, the recruitment period. So as I said, we need to advertise through 3 different platforms. And one of these platforms needs to be Job Bank. Something that you need to keep in mind is the Job Bank position needs to be open. The advertisement needs to be open throughout the entire duration of the process. So not just the 4 weeks like the other 2 platforms. We need to continue that throughout the processing until we receive our response on the application. And another tool that we need to use under Job Bank, it's called Job Match, meaning that for all the potential candidates that the system recommends to us and that are rated certain stars and above, we need to invite them to apply for the position. Whether they decide to apply or not, that's on them, but we need to make the effort of inviting them to apply through this platform. Again, only considering Canadian citizens or permanent residents. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And I believe that was it from my end. If no one else has more questions for now, then I think we can wrap it up for today. Here we go. So I'll leave my contact details here. Feel free to WhatsApp me, email me, or just contact us through our website. I'll be happy to answer any questions. As I said, once the recording is ready, we will share it together with the slides and some of the links that we make reference to. Thank you so much for joining. I hope this was useful, and we'll be doing more of this as we talk about more in-depth topics. Again, today was just an overview of all these available options, but we'll be planning on doing more of stream-specific webinars or information sessions for you to get more deep in-depth understanding. So thank you, everyone. I wish you, it's very sunny here in Vancouver. So I wish everyone who has sun outside to enjoy it today. And we'll get in touch through email, as I said, and hopefully work together in the future. Thank you very much. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.